She moved on while I was still in prison, and I hated her for it. 20 years later, I realized leaving me was the greatest act of love she could give. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 22 years in prison for a decision that took less than 2 minutes to make. People think life changes in big dramatic moments, explosions, fights, disasters. But sometimes the moment that destroys everything is quiet. A choice, a reaction, a mistake you would undo instantly if time allowed it. Before prison, my life was simple, not perfect, but stable. I worked as a warehouse supervisor outside Tulsa. The pay wasn't incredible, but it was steady. We had a small brick house on a corner lot with a tree in the front yard that dropped leaves every fall and made the driveway impossible to keep clean. I used to complain about that tree constantly. Funny what you miss later. My wife Laura was the center of that life. We met when we were 24. She had this calm presence that balanced my restless energy. Where I reacted fast, she thought things through. Where I got loud, she stayed steady. She grounded me in ways I didn't fully appreciate at the time. Our marriage wasn't a movie romance. It was grocery lists on the fridge, folding laundry together, falling asleep on the couch during TV shows, small arguments about money or chores. But underneath all that ordinary life was loyalty. Or at least, I believed there was. The night everything changed, I wasn't thinking about consequences. I was thinking about pride, anger, and proving a point. 2 minutes of bad decisions. 2 minutes that turned into flashing lights, handcuffs, courtrooms, and eventually a judge saying words that still echo in my mind. 22 years. Numbers can feel abstract until they attach themselves to your life. 22 years suddenly meant birthdays missed, holidays gone, gray hair appearing while you're trapped in the same place. It meant Laura living an entire lifetime without me. When I looked at her in the courtroom, she was crying so hard her shoulders were shaking. That image burned into my memory. After sentencing, during our first visitation, she pressed her hand against the glass and said, "I'm not going anywhere." I believed her completely. At first, she kept that promise. She visited every month, sometimes driving hours just to sit across from me in a loud visitation room filled with echoes and guards shouting instructions. She wrote letters, long ones, telling me about neighbors, about repairs on the house, about her job, about normal life continuing outside those walls. Those letters were oxygen. They reminded me I still had a place in the world. But prison changes time in ways people outside don't understand. Months stretch endlessly, but years somehow disappear. Around year 5, her visits became less frequent. Around year 7, her letters got shorter. Around year 8, they stopped. Then one afternoon during mail call, I heard my name. The envelope had her handwriting. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. Inside was a letter that shattered me more than the sentence ever had. She told me she had met someone. She told me she was getting remarried. She told me she hoped someday I would understand. I remember sitting on that bunk staring at those words until they blurred together. Something inside me cracked open. Rage, betrayal, humiliation, abandonment. It felt like being replaced, like my entire existence had been erased and rewritten without me. That night, I punched the wall until my knuckles bled. And for years after that, I told myself she had betrayed me. Anger can be a survival tool in prison. Hope is dangerous in a place where disappointment is constant. But anger? Anger gives you energy. It gives you a story where you're the victim instead of the cause. And for a long time, that story kept me going. I repeated the same thoughts over and over. She promised. She didn't wait. She replaced me. Every time loneliness hit, during count time, during holidays, during nights when the cell block got quiet, I leaned into that anger. It was easier than facing guilt, easier than facing regret. But prison is also a place where truth slowly catches up to you. I watched other men receive divorce papers. I watched relationships collapse under distance and time. I saw wives stop answering calls. I saw girlfriends disappear without explanation. At first, I judged those women harshly, just like I judged Laura. Then one day, an older inmate named Raymond sat next to me during chow and said something simple. Out there, life keeps moving. We're the ones who paused it. That sentence stayed with me for years, because deep down, I knew it was true. Laura hadn't chosen prison. She hadn't committed the crime. She hadn't agreed to sacrifice decades of her life. But she was living the consequences anyway. Loneliness, financial pressure, emotional strain, uncertainty, fear. I started remembering things differently. The exhaustion in her voice during phone calls. The way she tried to smile during visits, even when her eyes looked tired. The stress she carried but never fully expressed. And slowly, my anger began to crack. Not disappear, but soften. I started realizing she wasn't abandoning me, she was drowning. And eventually, she chose to save herself. That realization hurt in a completely different way. It wasn't rage anymore. It was grief. Grief for what we lost. Grief for the life we never got to live. Grief for the man I had been. The man whose decisions created this reality. And underneath that grief was responsibility. For the first time, I truly understood. I had put her in an impossible situation. About 2 years before my release, something unexpected happened. I received another letter from Laura. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade. Seeing her handwriting again felt surreal, like opening a time capsule from a previous life. The letter wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was calm, mature, peaceful. She told me she hoped I was doing okay. She told me she had 2 children now. She told me life had been complicated but good. And she wrote one sentence that changed everything inside me. I hope one day you understand that leaving wasn't because I stopped loving you. I cried harder than I had in years. Not from anger, from understanding. For 20 years, I believed love meant staying no matter what. That loyalty meant sacrifice without limits. That her leaving proved she didn't love me enough. But that sentence showed me something different. Love doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes love looks like survival. If she had stayed with me out of guilt or obligation, she would have sacrificed her entire future for my mistake. She would have lived alone for decades. She might have grown resentful, bitter, broken. That wouldn't have been love. That would have been 2 lives destroyed instead of 1. The truth I finally understood after 2 decades was this. She didn't replace me. She rebuilt her life. And she had every right to do that. More than that, she deserved to. Today, when I think about Laura, I don't feel resentment. I feel gratitude. She loved me deeply when she could. She stayed longer than many people would have. And when staying became harmful, she let go. That took courage. If you're listening to this and someone moved on without you, a partner, a spouse, someone you thought would always be there, I want you to hear this. It doesn't always mean you weren't loved. Sometimes it means life demanded more than love alone could carry. Here's what 22 years taught me. Love isn't measured by how long someone stays. Sometimes it's measured by the fact that they stayed at all. And sometimes, letting go is the most loving decision a person can make.